I've worked with brands like Nike and Meta, generated $90 million for my clients, and over the last year, I've spent time with 8 different billionaires, some as clients, some as mentors, and some as friends. And what I've learned is that the wealthy doesn't just think differently, they communicate differently, and they protect their time and energy in ways that most people never see. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 5 principles that I've learned from people with 100 million to billions in net worth that completely changed how I operate and that will help you think bigger, achieve more, and progress faster than anybody else. Principle number 1 came from a $50,000 a year mastermind, and it's now one of our core mantras at my business. I was at this mastermind a few years ago, and it was 90% men, killers in the online marketing space. They're running 8- and 9-figure companies, and one of them had just exited his business, and he said something that really stuck with me. He said there's a big difference between being easy to understand and impossible to misunderstand. So that day, I pulled out my phone, I sent a Slack message to our entire company, and I'm like, this is now one of our mantras. 3 years later, everybody on our team constantly repeats this to each other. We use it in all of our communication. That's internal discussions, client Slack messages, on team meetings, even our marketing. And here's what I've noticed. The most successful people are impossible to misunderstand communicators. For example, you know those ultra short texts that successful people tend to send, like yes, or just paid the invoice, or how much is it? People think it's because they're just so busy. But I've found it's often because their communication is super clear up front, that they don't need to say much at the decision point, or they're just asking the absolutely critical questions to make their decision. When you train yourself to be impossible to misunderstand, you reduce literally 50% of the back and forth work you normally have to do with your team, with vendors, with clients, with your family and friends, with everybody. And so I'm currently working towards valuing my working time at $10,000 an hour. That's $166 per minute. Any time that I'm fixing a miscommunication or clarifying something that I already said, that is costing me money. I see becoming impossible to misunderstand as one of the easiest ways to buy back your time. So before you send any message to anybody, ask yourself, could this be misinterpreted? And if yes, take the time to rewrite it. Just do the upfront work of thinking about what you're actually trying to communicate. But just so you don't overthink everything, only allow yourself to rewrite it twice and then send it. You're going to get better at this over time as you continue to practice it, and that's how you can gift your future self more time. The second principle is something I wish I had known at 18, and it would have saved me years of chasing the wrong advice. When I was 18 years old, I flew to San Francisco for a startup conference, and I was in an Uber crossing the Bay Bridge with 5 people running 8- to 9-figure venture-backed startups. And I mentioned I was thinking about starting an events company, and this one guy immediately goes, "Oh, that's a terrible idea. Events businesses are the worst businesses to start." And he goes on this 5-minute rant. Because I was 18 with no business and he was a 9-figure tech founder, I literally never considered pursuing an events business ever again after that. But later on, I felt so shameful and regretful that I hadn't done my own research and due diligence to confirm that decision. While I now agree with him that a tech business is easier to start and scale than an events business for someone with my skills, this taught me that when someone gives you advice, don't just take it at face value. Ask why. Most of the time, advice is not universal. People tend to project based on their own fears, their own incentives, their own experience. And so back then, if I had simply asked, well, why do you think that? I'd have understood his perspective instantly. He chose to start a tech business, therefore he was biased towards those types of businesses probably having a higher success rate or being easier to scale than an events business. So if you keep digging 1 or 2 whys deeper, the real reason will always surface. And once you understand that, you can finally decide if their perspective actually applies to you or if it's just a reflection of the life that they chose, but not the life that you want. Here's another example where I let someone else's advice stall my business. I was at a client retreat and I mentioned that I was thinking about hiring a recruiter to find some talent. And the client immediately said, "Oh my gosh, you do not need a recruiter." And she went on this rant about how I didn't need one. I didn't hire a recruiter for more than 12 months because I took her advice to heart. But I later discovered that the people running the types of companies that I aspire to build all use ruthless headhunters to find the best talent. And that's when it finally made sense. If I wouldn't trade businesses or lives with somebody, then I need to take their ideas with a grain of salt. So before you take anybody's advice to heart, first make sure you understand their perspective and then ask yourself, would I be happy if I traded my entire life with theirs? Not just their money and their success, but everything. And if the answer is no, you want to filter that advice really carefully. But here's where it gets interesting, because sometimes you need to do the opposite. A mentor of mine taught me early on that it's important to know when to separate the message from the messenger. For example, there are plenty of people that I would see online or at events early on in my career, and I would think, oh, you're such a douche. I would never want to trade lives with you. Like, I don't really respect you as a person. But at the same time, I respected the business that they had built, and I respected their expertise. And that taught me that I could still learn from something someone was saying and apply those lessons to my own business or life, even if I didn't like them. Most people haven't trained themselves to do this. They see someone online or in person, they immediately judge how that person looks or their reputation, and they either resonate with it or they want to shit on it. You don't have to wait to get the right information from the right person. You can get the right information from the wrong person and therefore apply it faster in your business. What I mean by that is, let's say that you saw 2 different Instagram posts from 2 different people about the same business advice. One person you really resonate with, you like them, you like how they look, you like who they are, and so you would take that advice to heart as soon as you see that. But let's say that you saw that post 6 months after you saw an initial post from somebody that you don't resonate with, you don't like how they look, you maybe don't like their business history, etc. And so when you see that post from them, you immediately dismiss it. If you had chosen to separate the message from the messenger in that example, then you could have applied that advice 6 months earlier. Instead, it costs you 6 months because you were waiting to get the right information from the right person. I hope that makes sense. Now, you can learn from all the interactions, all the content that you see, instead of dismissing certain people simply because you don't like the person that's sharing it. So next time you find yourself thinking, I don't like this person, you can pause and ask yourself, is the information itself still valuable? If yes, take the lesson and leave the judgment behind. Next up is the mandate of the top 1%, and this is where most people fail. I train every single person at my company to respect their time and everybody else's time on the team. And we work with established business owners who value their time at a very high dollar rate. So we want to make sure that everybody they're interacting with, including myself, is only reaching out after they've done preliminary research. What that means is somebody will go and find information first. They go and look inside of a client's database before asking them a question. They test things themselves. They try to figure it out. So by the time you've done your research, if you're doing this right, you're actually not asking people questions anymore. You are asking them to confirm the information that you found is correct or aligned with them. Now, this whole approach comes from a principle that's become a core pillar for me and my company, and it's from Paul Graham. He's the founder of Y Combinator, and he wrote an essay years ago about being relentlessly resourceful. The idea is simple. You are ruthlessly tapping into your existing resources or actively creating new resources for yourself instead of waiting on people. And these days with AI, you can literally get the answer to almost anything in just 3 minutes. But worse, when you ask a basic question, instead of figuring it out yourself first, people notice. And they see it as you either don't value their time or you're not capable of basic problem solving. In this age where you can figure out almost anything in minutes, not doing your own research first is basically telling somebody, I value my time more than yours. So here's the shift. Before you reach out to anybody for help, ask yourself, can I research this myself for 5 minutes? If yes, do it in your internal systems in places like Perplexity, which is my favorite. And then instead of saying, how do I do this? You get to say, hey, I researched this. Here's what I found. Can you confirm that this is correct? That's how you demonstrate competence instead of dependence, and that's how you earn respect either as a leader or somebody on a team. The last principle might sound harsh for some people, but it's absolutely necessary if you want to be a part of the top 1%. Over the last year, I've spent time with 8 different billionaires, and I started noticing a pattern in the types of people that they keep around them. It's not about just success or money. It's actually about 2 very specific things. First, reciprocal energy. If I show up to a dinner with a friend and that person is reciprocating the energy that I'm giving them, that doesn't mean that they need to be high energy all the time, but that they genuinely seem to care about you and what's going on in your life. Second is confidence, not arrogance, but confidence. They keep people around them who admit their faults and their weaknesses, but they're not insecure. The reason this matters is a lot of people think successful people only care about who has money, but that's actually not true. They care about who reciprocates their values and their energy and who shows up without insecurity. Reciprocation can mean they just give a damn about your kids, or they send you a happy birthday message, or they act genuinely interested in what you have to say when you're sharing things about what's going on in your life and your business, business, they try to help you. It seems like they care. It doesn't have to be some grand gesture. So take a look at your inner circle right now and ask yourself, are these people reciprocating the energy that I give them? Are they confident without being insecure? And if not, it might be time to reevaluate. These 5 principles have completely changed how I operate in business and life. But if you want to see how I'm using AI and automation to scale my business even faster, watch this video next where I break down the exact tools I use every single day. And thanks for watching because I'm sick while recording this. I'll see you in the next video.